Hi, welcome to TamiyaSC. I'm Armand Gutierrez. Today we're going to be discussing how to upgrade your car. So for one of our previous videos, you saw Sean and I build a box stock car. It's my little Miku car. And so today what we're going to be doing is upgrading our box stock car to become an official Tamiya Class car. Now what that entails is putting on brand new rollers and making sure that we fit the requirements of the Tamiya rules. So according to the Tamiya car rules, we can put parts on the car so long as they're Tamiya official, and we can make the car go faster, as fast as we want, and pretty much let this thing crash. So in the specific video, today we're going to be discussing how to upgrade your parts with the basic car kit. The basic tune-up parts set for the AR chassis is what we've chosen, and so here's the key to buying any single Tamiya part. On the back of the package, where aside from the name and the part number and how much yen it is, there will be a list of usable cars and parts with. And so the list for this package, this green one with the green parts, for the basic tune-up parts, part number 15450, it says it is usable with the following chassis and type of cars: MA, MS, AR, VS, Super 2, and Super XX chassis. So what that means is that if you own any one of those types of cars, which at the front of your car, on the front of your box, it'll say what type of chassis you are. Here we have an example of a Super 2 chassis, which was mentioned on this as compatible for this set. It means that we can use it. On other parts as well, it'll also let you know what other type of parts. So here are another part, and it says MSAR. Actually, it's the exact same list, but it also says Super 2, Super X, Super XX, and TZX chassis, which are some more rare chassis, but nonetheless, if you got those chassis, then you can use the parts. Most parts will work with most cars. It's only very specific parts that you gotta worry about. So if you find a part and you're like, wow, that looks really great, how come I haven't seen more of that? It may be because it's for a specific chassis. But now that we're getting into the future of Tamiya Mini 4-wheel drive, you're gonna see a lot more parts available. So today we're going to put this whole set on this car so that way we can race in the Tamiya Class and put in a more powerful motor and actually maybe win some races. But the thing is that there are certain sets of rules that we have to follow, and here is a Tamiya box checker. It's just a plastic box, and according to the dimensions of the box, if your car can fit in this, then you're legal to race. So right now, a box stock car, any box stock car that you put in, you're going to have plenty of room in it. You can go back and forth and side to side and have tons of room. What we're going to do with this set is fill out that room, so that way we're at the very edge of every single part of this box, so that way we have a better chance of winning. Because according to this, if this isn't the same size or length as a track length is, I believe, 115 millimeters, and your car width has to be 105 millimeters at most. So that means you have to have 10 millimeters between you and the track at all times, whether it's that divided up, so like 2 and 8 or 5 and 5, etc. And the reason why is because if you make a car that is 115 millimeters long, then there's no chance of your car falling out because you're just going to be hitting the wall back and forth all the time. So we're going to upgrade our car to fit that 105 width millimeter requirement, and then the car height can't go over 70 millimeters. That's actually something rather interesting about this car checker. If you buy one, you have to make sure that you're a good height, because here, with our little checker tool that's the same height as well, we have a 70 millimeter mark right here, but the height of the actual box is much lower than that. I would say it's about 15 millimeters lower. But for this little checker, it's also the same width. So if your rollers fit within this little tiny ruler, here, show that a little better, then you're good to go. Otherwise, you can buy the box and be good as well. There's also a brake height, and we'll talk about that later in another video, but you have to be at least 1 millimeter off the ground on all sides except for your tires. So let's actually get into this right now. Instead of using this kit to make sure our car is good and ready until the very end, we're actually going to use it to hold all the parts and pieces in this bag. Most of the time, what I really enjoy doing is building a Tamiya car very similar to a Lego set. I have a box for trash, and I have another box for all the parts and pieces. And so here are the instructions. The instructions for this one are going to be larger than most instructions that you get, even for the instructions on how to build your car, because this has multiple parts that you would normally buy separately. Alright. Making sure you have a good, clean environment to make sure you do everything in is pretty important, because if you do drop anything, you're going to really regret it later on. So everything that this kit comes with are weights to make sure that you are stable within the track. Once you take a jump and you bounce. Oh, I forgot cutters. Let's see if I can cut it with this knife. Yes, I can. So you got your screws and your washers to make sure everything runs smoothly, and then you have your spacers. And your spacers are particularly important because the spacers are going to define or pretty much make your rollers reach to their maximum height according to the kit. And the reason why you want really high rollers is so that way you can be more stable. Of course, if you're going to go for something for a little bit more speedy and less stable, you're going to want to keep your rollers low. But we'll go into more detail on that later. So first things first, we got to undo the work that we did on our box stock. So let's take the figurine out, which again is not normal. That was a terrible snap. Did not feel good about that one, but I don't normally build cars like these, so it's okay. Got to take the lock off. And here we actually have mistake number one that I made. I left the batteries inside the car, which you actually never want to do. You can, to be absolutely honest, but you don't want to do it because then there's a possibility that they might corrode in the car if you leave it in there for years on accident. So the first thing we're going to do to the box stock car is actually take off the rollers that we put on so precisely and so well last time in our video. And I'm actually going to make an extra box to hold all the extra pieces. So there's a roller and a washer and the screw, and we put that to the side. If you're going to buy a car and you're going to upgrade it immediately without even going to the box stock stage, I highly suggest holding off on just the rollers and everything else you put together, because sometimes you will end up wanting to keep some of the older plastic parts in, and sometimes you don't want to. Also, not only that, but the back bumper is also something you can leave off if you're going to put it on, but a little bit more about that later. Right now we just want to make sure that we unscrew these really nice and make sure we don't de-thread technically our plastic parts in case we need them for later. Alright, so now let's take off this back tray roller. I don't even know what to call this piece. I guess we'll find out in the instructions pretty soon. So I've only done this type of upgrade once before. Actually no, twice before. And so it's using FRP plates instead of carbon plates, and it's also using a lot more plastic than the metal rollers that I'm used to. And the reason why this setup's really good to start off with is because not only does everything come in the package, but it also gives you instructions on how to do everything. And if you follow the instructions, then you'll be Tamiya regulation rules. So let's see, what do they want me to do first? Oh, nothing on one side, everything's on one side. So that's cool. Alright. So within the kit, we have the largest pieces and the most noticeable one are the FRP plates. So these FRP plates are just basic roller stays, and so they have a whole bunch of holes to make sure that they can go within the car itself. So right now for our car, we have the chassis, we have the terminals along with the axles, and the wheels still left on it. And so what we're going to be placing is the FRP plate, the back FRP plate, and the rollers on top of them, or through them, to extend the width of the whole car. So the very first thing that we want to do is actually something very unique to the Super 2 chassis itself. We are going to want to cut out... Oh, forgot my cutters. Here, let's take a quick cut so that way I can get some other stuff too. Okay, and we're back. Very quick cut. So, the first thing that we're going to do is something very unique to the Super 2. We have this small little piece right here, and this was on your original sprue for your original car, and we're going to cut it out because the dish in the very front of the car is actually so low, we need to put this piece inside of it so that way we can make sure that the FRP plate is actually smooth and actually has a real surface to be on top of. So what we want to do is place this right into here. And there's no instructions on this, which I found so weird, but that's just how it goes sometimes. I don't know why. So we're going to put it over these holes, these screws. Is that even? I don't think that looks even. We want it this way. There we go. So this pink piece, whoop, shoot, that's so small and difficult. Either way, this pink piece is going to go right here over these two screw holes, and that's going to raise it quite a bit so that way it's level with these other two sides. Then what we're going to do is place the FRP plate right above it to see if those holes even line up and if we need those holes. And according to this FRP plate, we do not need it. Guess that's the first time for everything. Every single time I've built something else, I've really needed those holes. So let's see where this does line up. Oh, very interesting. Alright, put that in there. So, technically when we take an FRP plate, all these hole placements are really important. The ones on the outer edge are going to be the ones where your rollers go in. The ones on the innermost part are going to be where you actually screw it into the chassis to hold it out. Now, if you take a look at the FRP plate and the chassis, you can notice that the rollers on the outside are going to be much wider than the natural rollers here. That way you can max it out to that 105mm requirement. So let's see what kind of screws they want us to use. They want us to use 2 5mm screws. No, 4 5mm screws. So you go in here, check them out. Oh, you really can't mistake those at all. If you really want to, you can be meticulous and you can actually measure out all the screws against your little ruler. Or you can actually just look at it and really realize, like, wait a minute, this is the smallest screw that we have, so let's use that one. So right now, I'm actually going to use 2 5mm screws to screw this in, because the space between the bottom of the screw and the top of this chassis, they're too far apart. If I put a 5mm screw in, it's just going to sit there and it's going to fall out immediately. So we'll just attach this at two places instead of the 4, which is supposedly less stable, but to be honest, I think it's okay. Within this game, compromise is always okay. If you're going to go for the gold and whatnot, you're going to have to buy the extra pieces or find the extra pieces from other people. And so I'll try to show this to you as best I can. But right now, because there is a screw here and a screw here, and because of the way the chassis is designed, there's all this space right in here, and there's a huge gap within here as well. I don't think you can really see it, but this bottom space was supposed to be filled up by this piece right here, but this specific FRP plate doesn't screw in at the 2 small points here. They go to a farther out station. So if I had more spacers like this, I could potentially put that inside and then have those screws go through there, or have longer screws just go all the way through and really get into the chassis. But I think 2 screws for this setup will be okay. I mean, right now we're already looking at that front not bending at all. The FRP plate keeps it pretty steady. So they wanted me to put that in, and now they want me to put the rollers in. And then later on, we will put the back rollers in the back FRP plate, along with weights. Oh, that doesn't seem too bad at all. Great. So let's do the first thing then. Reading instructions is always really good. Making sure you know what you're doing. As a show host, that's not my expertise. I don't always know what I'm doing. So let's see, they want us to take two 25mm screws. That 5, 10, 15, 20, yep, this is 25. Where's the another 25? Here's another 25, yep. We want to take these. We want to put a lock nut on one of them. So it's the little nut with a cut in the very middle. I hope you can see that. Put that on. We're going to take a gold washer, a gold spacer washer, like so. Put that through right here. And then we're going to want to put this in the most forward hole out of the last three, which would be the 13mm spot. Oh, I just did that a little backwards. So you put the gold screw on this, put this through, then you take the gold spacer and you put that on, because that gold spacer is going to act as your washer for the screw. So right now, we have it right there, like so. And here's the interesting thing about FRP plates and actually all of the Tamiya parts. You're going to have three different holes, pretty much, or 3 or 4 different holes on every single piece that you have. So if this is the back piece, the hole that is farthest out is supposed to be for 9mm rollers. The next closest one in is supposed to be for 13mm rollers, or I'm sorry, 9mm rollers, then 11mm rollers. Going a little bit more further in is 13mm rollers, and then the circle that is the farthest in, oh my gosh, this is so confusing. I'm sorry. Just gonna be honest here, I didn't practice this at all. And you can tell. So we have 9mm rollers, then we go to 11mm roller, go another hole in, 13mm roller, and then go to another hole in, 17mm roller, that's all the way back here, and then finally the one way back here are 19mm rollers. The reason why those placements are really important is because the farther and farther you go back, the more and more space it gives for your roller, so that way you still stay within that 105mm roller. If you take that roller, like a 19mm one, and you put it in the hole for the 9mm spot, you're going to be way too big, and you're not going to be able to fit within this box. So make sure that whatever set you get, you're following the instructions on where the holes are, and pretty much take your time on where these place. So now we take the 13mm green disc, we put it right over the washer, the gold spacer, so now the gold spacer is right in the middle there, and this is coming out. They ask us to take a regular lock nut and put this in. I always have trouble with the lock nuts. There we go. You can either do it by hand, or you can take pliers and you can tie it on, or you can get the lock nut tool and you can just spin that right on in. We're not going to make it too tight, so that way we can still spin. And once I have it firmly gripped, now I like to take a screwdriver, put it right on in, and then just give it one little tightening, and now it looks like we're pretty secure. So now they're going to ask us to take a roller for the front, a 12mm spacer. Oh, I'm sorry, not spacer, roller. Not roller, spacer. And here's the measurement stick. Yep, that's 12. They want us to put it on right there, like that. That doesn't seem like enough. Oh, 25mm screw? Don't tell me I did that wrong. 15, 20, 25. Shoot, dang! Here's a classic mistake. Putting the wrong screwdriver in, or the wrong screw in. So now we undo this, because this screw is much too small for the whole thing. Here's actually another tip on how to take apart your car. When you take it apart, try to hand pick every single part when it comes out. That way, you don't have parts flying around, and you're pretty much good to go. So both those screws were wrong. Put this through here. 13mm roller. And then gold roller spacer. Put the other roller on. Put the lock nut on. There we go. Just a couple seconds of a change. Now we can take the 12mm spacer, put that on top, and they're going to have us actually put on a green head on top of it so that way we can slide against the wall. Screw this right on top. Now this one's going to actually feel a little weird screwing this on because you'll pretty much be making a whole new screw with inside of it, or not screw, but you're going to be cleaning out the plastic as you go through. So now we have the basic roller and a little stay on it. So here's the green roller. This is going to roll against the wall. And then here, this mushroom top, if the car tilts, the top part will hit first and kind of try to push it back in. That way, if not, or if you don't have that, this roller will be all the way down here. The screw won't even be up here. You'll make the screw the same size as the roller, and then you can tip way more easily. Interestingly enough, there's a whole bunch of upgrade parts that you could have done alternatively without this kit, just for this beginning part. So the first thing is that if you're going to skip the kit and you're just going to go straight for the best parts or for your own custom parts that are all different and will do different things, you're going to get these stays. So these are pink metal stays. They're not carbon. And these are the alternative to getting FRP or for carbon plates. Of course, you check on the back for whether or not they work for your car. And this is a specific kit where it comes with a front and back piece. Sometimes people like to use back pieces as front pieces as back pieces. It really depends what kind of setup that you're looking for. It depends on how far you want those rollers out or how close you want them in. Also, the thing is that not all front pieces work with all chassis. Sometimes the chassis is very long and it actually goes over its hook-in part. And so here, when we put the chassis on, or the body, excuse me, you can see that this FRP plate is still fine. It's not being covered at all. Some pieces will actually go over that and it'll actually cover your front plate completely. And you have to make sure it's a certain width or length to make it fit. And sometimes you have to specifically look at the part, or you have to kind of figure it out for yourself. Or you could just ask a more experienced player or somebody who actually owns that piece. So that's the first type of upgrade, changing the type of plate that's on the front. The next type of upgrade from this point is changing the type of roller. And you can go with all sorts of different types of rollers. You can go with the different types of rollers, so 9mm, 11mm, 13mm, 17mm, and 19mm for the front. Or what you can do is you can do these metal rollers. And here's an example of 13mm metal rollers. These are pink. You'll see these later on in my pink build. And these are have ball bearings inside of them, and they are pretty good for rolling around. They're rather smooth. Another alternative for your front pieces of the car, right here, they're called double aluminum rollers, and these ones have rubber rings on them. What's so interesting about these rollers is that they count as one roller, and they actually do the job of what this top pink piece does, only a little bit differently. So these rollers have a bottom base of 13mm, and they have a top base of 12mm. So what ends up happening is, as your car tilts, instead of just sliding against the wall here, the roller still continues rolling. And so it makes sure that your tilt is even fast. And you can do that alternatively. To be absolutely honest, I love having these double roller stays on the front for all of my cars. And the reason why is because it makes them always more stable. If I'm going for something solely for speed, and I have my rollers really, really high in the back, I mean like maybe the 70mm mark, the top, I would then have just regular rollers in the front. Otherwise, I would have double rollers in the front and then regular rollers in the back. Some people actually really like to do double rollers in the back as well, but it's harder for those to activate because you usually have two in the back. Alternatively, you could have 2 rollers in the front and 1 roller in the back. But no matter what, the rule is that you have to have 6 rollers total. You can't go over 6. So usually it's 2 in the front, 4 in the back, or 4 in the front, 2 in the back, but that's extremely rare. I mean, that's really rare. Sometimes people actually just go with 4 rollers and they work out just fine. It depends on what class they're in and how fast they're going. But since we're specifically designing this car for the Tamiya class, we are going to do our best to make it as stable as we can and as good as we can. So here are the 2 alternative upgrades, the pro upgrades, if you will, if you know what you're doing or if you take your time to do the research to figure out what parts you want. Another 2 alternative upgrades that still apply to the front and you can apply to the back are 2mm cap screw set, where it's 25mm screw and a 30mm screw. So these screws are black and they're extremely hard and they can't really bend, and so you would put those instead of just the regular screw in the front. And the reason why is because if this car crashes and let's say it falls like this or it just hits another car, this screw can bend and then you got to replace the whole screw, which you can do and that's fine. But if you're going to be racing a lot, and I mean a lot, then over time your car will bend and you're going to want to get these screws instead. And these will make sure that your screw won't bend over time and it'll be optimally peak. Finally, the last upgrade that's alternative to this set is these stays. And what these do is that they're plastic white rings, or maybe alternative colors. And what you do is that you put them on top of the roller, very similar to this, only they're smaller discs than whatever roller you have here. So the 2 discs these come with are 11mm and 15mm. So if you have a 17 or 19mm roller, on the top you would put the 15mm disc, and if you have a 13mm roller, then you would put the 11mm disc on the top. And so it acts just like this little mushroom top, only with a wider diameter, so that way you can tilt even less. And that's some pretty advanced stuff, all this packaging and whatnot. I mean, this is an expensive build. You got $7, $9, $14, and then $11. And so this is how customizing all these packages and putting them all together, that's where the main cost of this game goes. But once you buy everything and put them all on, you're done. And it's a little difficult to go over $120. I mean, really, it's really hard. But it's very different than RC cars where you spend $1,000 to start off. Alright, let's get this other piece done. Alright. So now I'm having a little bit of trouble getting this cap on. This is where this rubber piece comes in. You're going to get this little rubber tube within the kit, and what it's for is actually placing it over this piece. Just jam it on there. And what you do is you apply pressure. And the reason why is because this rubber will actually give you enough grip to make sure you got this thing screwing in rather nicely. What's interesting is now and then Tamiya will come out with an item, and it's supposed to be a tool to help you make a build, and people will actually use it for an actual racing part. The perfect example for that is actually this rubber piece. This rubber piece sometimes is used alternatively as a better braking system, and it can slow down your car rather well. Of course, it will wear down over time because a braking system in this game means just creating more friction, but nonetheless it works. And we'll go over that another time. In this build, you will not have a braking system, because the brake system is a little too advanced right now. Right now we're just trying to make a basic kit to make sure you're Tamiya ready. Not necessarily going to be Tamiya Pro. But, just like any other game, there are different ways to win. So right now we have our front pieces, and we got our 2 rollers, we have our 2 caps, and we're actually looking pretty good. The whole front is now done. It didn't even take that long. I spent more time talking and cleaning than anything else. So now we're going to have to work on the back piece. And the back piece is actually the part I always have trouble with. It's a little more complicated. So right now for this back piece, we're going to actually take the car off and work with the FRP plate alone, because they say to do that first. Oh, now I see. Okay. So the first thing that they want us to put on are the weights. So we're going to take our two longer screws, or two last screws, the screws that I accidentally used earlier. Let's see, two 20mm screws. Actually, that's not true. These are different sizes. 5, 10, 15, whoop, 5, 10, 15, 20. Yep, these are 20mm screws. We're going to put them on the back, like so. Luckily for FRP plates, there is no up and down. And the same thing kind of goes for the carbon plates as well. There is a back and forth, though, for some of them. Some of them, you'll have a extra piece coming out. It won't be a cut clean piece like this. So you'll have these holes, and then sometimes there will be much larger holes coming out. And what those larger holes are for is in case you were to flip the whole thing over and put it on a different type of chassis car. Either way, so we have the lock nut, we put it on there, and there's actually a really good braking system for that type of carbon piece, which hopefully we'll be able to go over again later. But right now we're just sticking with the basics. So we got our lock nut screw, we have our lock nut on the screw, and I hope you're following the instructions along while you're doing this with me. Otherwise that would be rather difficult. Get this screw on. Make that hand tight. And now this is where the weights come in. So you have these gold weights, put it right on there like so, and then we're going to cap it off with a smaller green cap. So the smaller green cap isn't going to help us stay within the track, it's going to just only help make this weight not fly off. So we just want to lightly screw that on. Be careful you don't screw this on too much or too hard, because the screw will just go right through the plastic, and then it'll look really ugly. So right now, we have a small hammer system. So this weight at the bottom, once a car takes a hit on the track, this weight will go flying when it's in the air, and then when it lands, it'll slam down, making sure that the car doesn't bounce up. This little weight will make sure everything goes our way. Because the car bouncing back up is actually more dangerous than it just trying to land back in. Hope that made sense. So let's put on the other one. So this game has been around for quite a few years. There are actually some chassis that are as old as I am, and I'm 26 years old, so that means in 1988 this game was still around, and back then it was the Wild West. There were no rules. People could just do all sorts of builds and tries and whatnot, but the parts were harder to get because there weren't as many parts. And also there were different types of games. In one game show they just made a track so that way the cars just went off the track and flew off, and they tried to see who could land further in a box that was quite far away. That was one game show. One time they actually had a championship race here in America, and it was very old school, and the track was just wild. Like, I don't even know how the cars stayed in most of the time, let alone win without what we have now. Like, for example, this weight system. I guess the cars were just slower back then. And now, the hard part, the hardest part technically in my opinion, is actually making the screw system, or the roller system in the back. So let's crack our hands, stretch a little bit before we get into the hard part, and I mean like the really, really hard part. So here we have this spacer, and it's a very special spacer. It's an octagon, and inside there are grooves for your screws to go inside of. So I could screw this in like so and be absolutely okay. What these are for is for making sure that you have a top roller and a bottom roller. So this piece is going to go on the FRP place, like so, and then through the bottom we're going to screw the screw in with the roller and the spacer on top of it. So you're going to have this connecting piece with two screws going into it, and having a top and bottom roller for your back. The system for having the 4 rollers in the back is much more stable than I believe having them in the front, because if you have them in the front and you take a jump, you could actually ride on the walls or get clipped on the walls much more easily. When you have them in the back, the front can wiggle a little bit more and not get as caught as easily because it has less rollers on it. But I'm sure it's more complicated than that. So let's take our 12mm screw. Now I'm questioning whether or not that this is the size because I screwed up that one time. Yep, this is correct. We want to put a regular fat washer on it, not a lock nut washer, or a lock washer. Oh, so many mistakes, but hey, this is what you get for free TV, right? Oh no! Classic mistake. Luckily I'm working on a hard wood floor, so I was able to actually hear the piece go by. So they want us to put the roller on. Now the roller can actually shake around quite a bit, so this is when we put our gold spacer in. Put that right in, nice on the roller. And then next they want us to put the super tiny little baby spacer. I can't even show that to you, it's so small. Put that on top of there. And they want us to screw this, a 3mm spacer. And they want us to screw this right on top of this piece. So that we get this very nice little system. Little roller on the top. It has the screw on the bottom for the FRP plate and the other screw. Now I'm going to make sure this is in. I have my lock nut. Oh, that doesn't work. Will this side work? Yes, this side works. So I can put that in there, or alternatively you can use the wrench that comes in the kit. And you can put that around there, like so. So if you don't have the little lock nut tool, you can put the kit in there and then screw it on top, but I'm going to do it my way because that's just way easier. Yet again, just another reason why you should have the right tools for the right game. So now that's done, and we're going to make the bottom part. So we get a, 20mm screw, so significantly longer, this long one. And then we, just like the other side, put a washer. Instead of putting the roller first, we're going to put the gold. Oh, no, they want me to put the washer on again. They want the thick part of the washer to come on the outside. Interesting. I guess that holds it in better. Oh, I guess it does. So here is the washer at the bottom. Then we have the roller, and then coming in from the top is that gold spacer washer. And then we need a spacer, don't we? Yeah, 6.7mm spacer. That's the kind of medium looking one. Put that right on top. There we go. That's all staying nice together. And then they want us to put a lock nut on top of that to lock it all down. Pretty good stuff. And then of course lock that in. Make this all nice and tight. There we go. I wonder if you can hear the crickets, because I know I can. So now now we have this screw, we have this screw, both of these alternative, and then we have our FRP plate. So these are 13mm rollers, so that means I want to put it on the third most inner hole, which I believe is here. And then, so we put the longer screw at the bottom, and we put the top screw, or the locking screw at the top, and we just simply guide it in like so. So now we have this huge long diameter, or this huge long connected screw. Spin that around a couple times. Now this is where I really need the wrench and actually some pliers. So I'm going to hold that lock nut at the bottom, and I'm going to twist the top screw just a bit to make it nice and tight. And now this are two very nice little rollers. Great. Let's do the exact same thing on the other side. So now we have the back piece completely done. We have all 4 rollers, and we have our 2 weights. Nice, good shake. Love that sound. So now we're going to have to attach it to the back. Since we removed the back roller stay, then we can now, according to the rules, or to the game, we can now just screw in the top. Really nice and easy with these tiny screws left. Now the extra pieces that we have in this kit are some extra tiny 5mm screwdrivers, or screws. Looks like 2 nuts, 1 large washer, and 1 lock washer, or lock nut washer. And then it gives us 2 extra little mushroom caps, so that way we can replace these once those wear down, because those will wear down if you race over multiple times. In one race, you probably won't notice very much a wear down, but you can. And so as soon as we're done screwing this in, I want to make sure you put it on the top of the chassis like so. You don't want to put it at the bottom here, because these rollers are extended out, and once you put it on the bottom, these are going to be touching the ground, and you can't have that. Not only is it impractical to race, but it's also against the rules. That 1mm stay off the ground is really important. There we go. So now the leftover pieces are rubber, the rubber piece, which you can actually use later, the little wrench, which you can also use later, and the replacement stays, and then some screws and stuff. And then of course, if your FRP plate didn't require for you to use this pink piece, then go ahead and keep that within the box. Now I'm going to take everything, put that right in there, and let's check to see if this car is legal. Ah, very nice. So now there's not as much stay. As you can see, it stays really nice and tight in there. We still have some space in the front and the back, but that's okay. Later on, we can put on a brake and take up that space. And then also, not only that, but you can see the side of the car. It's pretty low to the ground. This car is really low to the ground, actually. So here's one problem that a lot of people seem to have. As the car's going and it tries to land, it can get caught in between the wheel and the roller, just like this. So see how the wall right there is stuck in between this wheel and this roller? Well, that issue can be solved a couple ways. You can either raise your roller up a little bit closer by having a smaller screw in this set, or what you can do is you can put another FRP plate right across here if you buy another one, or you can add a brake system. And to be absolutely honest, it's a little rare for that to happen, but sometimes it does if you're going too fast. If you slow down, that would be perfectly fine. Now there's one last upgrade that I'd like to share that I thought I was going to be able to talk about in this, but apparently this car kit doesn't come with this type of upgrade. It's actually an upgrade of ball bearings for your axles. So these ball bearings go onto the side of the car where the axle goes, and instead of having it rub against plastic, it's rubbing against metal, and it's rolling around a whole bunch more as a ball bearing. And that makes it much easier for the transfer of energy for your wheels and tires. Oh, no, never mind, everything's fine. So now we have the very first upgrade for our Tamiya car kit. Let's put Miku back on. Actually, let's put the body back on. So if you chose the right parts, and if you figured out your chassis and you looked everything up and whatnot, your body will be able to stay on just fine, and everything will fit. And there we go. We now have our first Tamiya raceable car. And now we can take the stock motor out and we can put in a more powerful motor, like an atomic tune or a torque tune or a rev tune motor. You can also put in a light dash or a hyper dash if you want, but to be absolutely honest, I really doubt it that these rollers in this setup could handle that. If you're going to put in a more powerful motor, like the yellow light dash or the red hyper dash, or even a Mach dash or something more than that, then you're going to need either more weights or you're going to have to change your rollers to make sure that they really stay in. The general rule for the rollers is plastic is slow, rubber is a little faster, a little bit more stable, just straight up ball bearings is extremely fast, and pretty much the larger the diameter of the wheel, the more stable it can be. You're going to just have to test and try for yourself, or be a physicist and figure it out on your own. Either way, I'm Armand Gutierrez. This is TamiyaSC. See you next time.